All right, guys. I know you've probably been to my seminars before. We're going to cover a lot of the same stuff. I'm going to do a lot of the same stuff I have many times before. Mainly my purpose of doing that is to get your gears turning, to think logically, and think more about the fish itself than it is to give you this magic bullet. When we started doing this, my father and I, we had no clue what meat rigging was. We read about it in a couple articles in Great Lakes Angler magazine, and we didn't have the internet back then. You know, it wasn't a big thing here. So we started piecing it together, and that's ultimately how I came up with our product over time, the way we do our teasers, the length, all that fun stuff, which I'll get more in depth. But being able to think through this stuff logically is going to pay more dividends than network. And one of my biggest pet peeves, and I'm going to cover this a little bit throughout the seminar and why I go more in depth in some of these aspects, is in all reality, a lot of guys will sit there and say, this is your biggest piece of fishing tackle, is your phone. It's a big element of it, but one of the things that guys lose in doing it that way is they lose an understanding. Because even I have a pretty extensive network myself. I don't count on them to catch fish for me. You know, because there's plenty of times I go out there, I'll go out on a Thursday or Friday. You haven't been on the water since Sunday. I can't call Jim up and say, hey, how was the bite? Where are they at? Because a lot can change in 3 or 4 days. You have to be able to adjust based off of info you have. So with that being said, let's get started here. What we're going to cover, we're going to do the general concept and components and how all that works together. We're going to cover the speed element of it, which is a big part of meat rigging. We're going to get more into bait. Bait is the biggest part of a meat rig, hands down. I'll take quality over just bulk any day. I want my strips to look perfect. Color selection, playing to the different factors. That's where I'm talking more about being able to adjust, you know, to what you're seeing condition-wise and things like that. So as you go through the day, if you don't have a network to base things off of, you've got that general logic, that general knowledge base to say, hey, look, this is what I'm seeing water condition-wise. This is probably what I should do for my colors. Or this is where I'm marking fish. This is probably where I should set things. So let's jump right into the general concept. What the fish sees. How does a salmon feed? What are they feeding on out there? Especially kings. Alewives. How do alewives congregate out there?
Schools.
Big schools. So how are these fish going to feed on a big school? They're going to round them up and they're going to thrash through it, right? Trying to gorge themselves. Because you're talking about a fish that's an apex predator. And they basically go from inches long to, in many cases, well over 30 pounds in 3 to 5 years. To do that, they have to feed a lot. As they do that and they violently attack the school of bait, they're going to leave collateral damage. So as it's going, it's not going to get every alewife that it smacks or catches with its teeth or whatever. It's going to leave collateral damage, which is your wounded, bleeding bait fish. I always wondered how I could imitate that. For me, it was meat rigging. So what you basically have in that concept, or in that setup, and it all ties together. You start with your flasher. I'm gonna got one right here with a rig tied to it. And where you're gonna see, especially guys that are just starting out, is they think Dodger fly, they think flasher fly. The whole thought process there is that flasher is giving action to the fly. With a meat rig, you don't have that. So you can adjust your leader length however long you want it to be to adjust to different conditions, which we'll get more in depth into. Because the head itself is going to impart the action on the bait. What this acts as is an attractor. So the attractor and how the fish's brain interprets it, best of my knowledge, is another feeding fish. The signature it's putting through the water, the flash, the size of it, it's basically a whoomp, 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 whoomp. To a fish, it's going to get them agitated. They're going to say, what's going on? And then the visual aspect of it kicks in, the scent aspect of it kicks in. Now they're getting more in tune to feeding. Then we move to the teasers. So like they're basically in this handheld example here, those two flies that I got rigged up on the line. Best I can figure those represent. We've had a number of colors that get hot and cool off, then they'll get hot again, then they'll cool off. But we've had colors like our monkey puke, which I don't know if you remember me talking about that one years ago. That's a color that's been consistent for us for well over 15 years at this point. And what a monkey puke is it's basically red, copper, and gold. So it's that whole blood and scales concept. Why do these fish keep coming back to that same color for the teasers? I can change the head color to whatever I want, but when I've got red teasers, it's just consistent. It may not always get the biggest fish, it may not always get the most fish, but on slow days, it's the one that's catching fish. Then we move on to the bait, and that's basically just as it sounds. Now, as you can see there, this right here is just an empty bait head. But when you put a strip in it, it starts to look like a bait fish. And what that's doing through the water, and why you have the curve and line entry where it's at, is so when that's going through the water, it's corkscrewing. Now, if you've ever seen wounded bait fish in the harbor, dying bait fish, dying alewives, they're kind of doing what they call the death roll. You know, musky fishermen use that term a lot for how they're trying to entice fish at the last minute to come in and strike a bait. So now, if you think about it all coming together, you have your flasher, which actually I can go to the next screen here. You have your flasher, you have your teasers, and then you have your bait. Now I call that the butt crack. I'll get more in depth into leader length as we get more into the teasers and discussing each individual component. When it comes together, you've got your feeding fish. It just knocked the snot out of this bait. Blood and scales in the middle there. Here's your wounded bait, that's the easy meal. Big fish don't get big without eating a lot and taking the easy meals they can. They're gonna be opportunistic. One thing you will see, and I believe I actually cover it a little bit further on here, is people always talk about meat being a great midday bait. We'll run it from sun up to sundown. But if we're getting our big kings, more so in the last probably 5 or 6 years than ever before, all of our big kings are coming between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And what that is you've got these fish, let's say you've got a king that's this big, it's going to gorge itself, but then it gets full and it's going to take time to digest it and feed again. A fish this big is burning a lot more energy. So it's going to periodically feed throughout the day. As far as speed is concerned, that's another big element of it. You don't want your bait head spinning out real fast, but you do want it to spin. And the way to achieve that is you're going to test it in the water. You're looking for anywhere, we'll get them to work anywhere 1 to 4 rolls a second. We like it about 2 to 2.5 rolls. And what you'll see, I'll get this video playing here. I think I can get it from the remote here. Yeah, it's hard to tell because it's choppy video, but that bait head, it's rolling behind that flasher, and it actually will slow up at times and it'll dart down through the roll. And it's a triggering aspect of it. But you're basically representing a wounded bait fish there. Just got the snot kicked out of it. We're looking for meat speed, and this is also true for flasher fly midday, or spoons that can give you a little more action if you're trying to entice those midday bites. We're going to slow it down a bit. You know, let's say we're going 2.5, 2.6, 2.7 at the ball in the morning. I might drop it anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 mile an hour, you know, when I start getting into that midday bite. I'm not looking for numbers, I'm looking for size. Part of what I'm looking for is now you've got, think back to that school of bait. And this is another thing I see a lot of guys, and in my opinion, it's a mistake if you're looking for kings. You wouldn't be sitting here watching a seminar if you didn't want to get more kings. You know, and on a side note, I'll tell you right now, I'm from that school of thought that says, I like lower numbers, I like bigger size. We got an apex predator out there. Let's enjoy the size while we can and make it a hunt. It's more of a hunt than it is filling your cooler at this point, and I know you like that. So, but essentially it goes back to, okay, you got that small king. It's going to feed hot and heavy in the morning. You got more of them. You're going to get that hot early morning bite. Why do they shut down? But and these guys, when this bite shuts down, will then run offshore, chasing steelhead, chasing cod, chasing bites, and then they wonder why they don't get big kings. Those big fish don't leave the bait. They might slip just outside, just down into a little bit colder water, but they're still in the area. We had it this past summer during Salmonorama. We were fishing up off of Port Washington, up off Harrington. We were getting kings 90 to 110 on the bottom. Water temp was 61 degrees. And we were not getting kings until at least 10:30 in the morning, up until 2 o'clock. A couple of friends were getting fish in the area earlier in the morning. We just knew we had to grind it out. For whatever reason, we couldn't get a bite before 10 a.m. on kings. That colder water was another 3/4 of a mile offshore, 3/4 to a mile offshore, down on the bottom in 150. So what was actually happening, we were intercepting them as they were coming into the bait in 80s to 100s. So hang in the area, you got to be willing to grind it out. Overall, it's always been a slower bite midday for speed, what we're running, as well as numbers, but you do get the bigger fish midday. Like I said, slow and cold. So if you find that zone where I've got bait in, say, 90 or 100 feet of water down near the bottom, I'm not marking fish around it, but we were getting fish here earlier, don't go running way offshore. Troll out to 120, 130, drop your probe down if you got a probe, see what the temp is. If you're marking hooks, yeah, there's going to be lake trout, but there'll also be kings down there. We've got a lot of big kings where we're also getting trout. As far as bait is concerned, this is something I could go on and on and on about. I'll try to keep it somewhat simple here. We're going to be giving more info in time as to what we do. We've been so busy as a company, it's just keeping up. I haven't had a chance to do as much filming as I want to do, but we're going to be doing more on bait prep and things like that. We prefer home brine for a multitude of reasons. We run so much meat on our boat that I would be in the poorhouse if I was buying commercial bait all the time. Like, I'd be broke. So what we typically do is I'll buy flats of Pacific herring where I can get them, flats of other bait I can get. I don't know, is Rob going to be stocking whole bait this year at all or no? Try to. It gives you another element to your bait prep. We like it because I'm very picky on my bait. If I see a nick or scales, like a skin flap coming off on a strip, I'm pulling it, I'm putting another strip on. If I don't like the action it's giving, I'm pulling the strip, putting another one on. The only way I can do that is when I'm prepping my own bait. So, and I got the recipe on our website and everything as to what we do. Another thing we've done the last several years is, because we've had such a boom of bait, we'll get alewives coming into the harbors in the spring. So we'll go out, and it's actually a lot of fun. We'll go out coho fishing, you know, and when we come in, we'll just spot lock in the harbor, use the beaky rigs, and we'll jig up our bait. And they actually fight pretty good for bait that big. It's a lot of fun. But there's different cleaning methods and things like that. It is way more in depth. A lot of guys aren't willing to do it, but if you do get more into meat rigging, it's definitely a good way to go. As far as doctoring baits, I'll do it both with home brine as well as commercial strips. Like, let's say I came here and bought a pack of herring from Rob that was strips. I'm going to take that, I'm going to throw herring oil in it. The day before I go fishing, I'm going to get a little Tupperware, like a little Ziploc tub, throw my strips in there I'm going to use. I'm going to squirt it full of herring oil. I'm going to let them soak overnight in the fridge. Alewives, when I'm prepping and doing those, I'll add krill oil. I found works the best with alewives. I add the krill oil, put it in the bag, vacuum seal it, and it's in the freezer, and I'm ready to go when that time comes. You look on the picture here. I don't have the bottle in that image. One of the neatest little tricks when you're doing your own is you obviously have your canning salt, your milk, your powdered milk, and your distilled water. What you're basically doing is the canning pickling salt removes moisture. The milk will take, it helps prevent freezer burn. And then there's another thing I throw in there is a laundry additive. It's Mrs. Stewart's liquid bluing. And that brings out shine on the scales like you wouldn't believe it. It's night and day. I can take a pack where I didn't do it versus a pack I did, and it looks like a live bait fish, the amount of sheen you get off.
Where do you get that bluing?
Gotta look at grocery stores. Once you get a bottle, it's gonna last you forever because you're only using like half a teaspoon at a time. So, I'd like to say someone told me they got it at Piggly Wiggly, but I might be mistaken. So. As far as buying commercial, quality matters. You know, if all you can get is something that's been sitting at the bottom of a freezer for a couple of years, it's going to have some burn on it. Do what you can to doctor it up, you know, add extra scent, you know, but you're going to want quality. You're going to want something that looks good, something with a little more bulk, a little more weight to it, because in time what ends up happening is it's pretty simple. You can't really add bait to a strip of bait, but you can cut it down. Like if it's a little too heavy and the head's not rolling right, or you don't feel it's rolling right, trim it down. If you want it to fit better, you can trim it down. You can't add to it. So, and some strips are just so thin, so narrow, they don't really work all that great. Again, doctor them. I'm always doctoring my strips, herring oil, krill oil. I might dye them, you know, like a green or a blue or a red, you know, depending on what the bite pattern's been. My favorites are Big One, which I believe are alewives, NND, which is, it's tough to get unless you're willing to drive. You basically have to go out to New York and act like you're in New York and from New York and buy it because the woman won't ship here because of what Michigan has done to the bait. And then Familiar Bite, which is, I think that's pretty much what Rob gets. Familiar Bite's a good one. As far as selection, rigs and flashers, you kind of play the conditions, which I'll cover more in a little bit. Follow your general trend. If you hear that yellows are going, run a meat rig. Everyone's looking for this magic bullet, especially when it comes to kings. Meat rigs will put more kings in your boat, but it's by no means a magic bullet. You still have to pattern the fish. You have to figure out what they're wanting to go on. And one of the things I've noticed through the years when you talk to guys is, what happens when a flasher fly is not working for you? What do? You change it up. What happens when the spoon's not going? Change it up. For whatever reason, when it comes to meat rigs, guys will sit there, they'll set a meat rig and say, well, we didn't get fish on meat today. But they never bothered to change the color, the flash, or any of it. Play with the bait. You know, you still got to pattern the fish to some extent. And then you'll find in time that you find combos that work on your boat. You know, there's rigs that I make that guys knock them dead on, that I haven't been able to get to work that great on my boat. But then I have other rigs that I make, you know, that I sell that work great for us, that other guys might struggle on. You know, it's finding the combos that work for you. We have the old monkey puke. You know, that's a great color on our boat. For whatever reason, we do well on reds. It doesn't matter what other guys are doing, reds produce for us. You're going to tend to color match. Like there you got our corn-fed flasher, and that's a haymaker. If they're not going on the bright yellow, I might put a redemption on there, something a little more subtle, like a limeish yellow color. Or I might go to just like a boy blue or something that's going to just touch on that center line, but I'm going to color match to some extent. And it's going to be along the trends of the bite pattern. So if you hear guys are going on greens or guys are going on blues, follow that. By conditions, it's same as other ones. You know, it's dirty water, you're going bright colors. You know, I'm going things that are going to react to the sunlight. You know, like your fluorescents, your bright yellows, your bright greens, things that are going to give me more flash. You know, UV, things like that. Mainly because, just let me go back to this slide here. What can happen is I noticed it big time that particular morning. That was off of Michigan City, Indiana, several years ago. We found the kings off of Burns Ditch. We went down there, and when we set up, we had maybe 1.5 feet of visibility. It was mud. We were slamming them on meat, and this is in May. We're just slamming them one after another. Slip outside, you know, to do a loop around. Now we can see 5, 6, 7, 8 feet. our rods went dead. We're still marking fish, our rods went dead. So what we started to realize is we were a little too much flash on our flashers. We went more to a crushed ice, white blank, to where to keep numbers going and keep rods going, that was only like, I don't even know if that was half our catch that morning. To keep rods going, we were ready with backup combos that as soon as that water started to clear up, we're putting our softer spread in. As soon as we started coming back into the mud, pull them, put the other ones out. Just adjusting to the conditions. But in general, you want brighter colors, more flash. You know, it's the same with anything. Flash your fly, spoons, plugs. You want more flash, more noise, more whatever you can get in the water when it's dirty. Cloudy or rough, we always do really well on blues. A lot of guys do good on more your greens. So your deeper greens, things like that tend to work better in rougher conditions. Or overcast, it tends to give it a little bit more of a natural look with the lighting. Calm, sunny, it's a little contradictory to some guys, but going with darker baits, more natural looking baits, that, you know, my old man, we caught that king during Salmon-a-rama a couple of years ago, and we had a pattern going, and it was flat calm, it was sunny. Our top baits were basically those two right there. It was oil slick and black mamba, and then occasionally we were getting them. I don't have the picture up here. Our hip shooter, which is, I'm not going to scroll back through it. We got them out there, but just a general, a subtle pattern. And what typically ends up happening is the reason that is when that sun is shining bright and it's flat calm, it pushes those fish down. They're getting blinded by the UV light, all this extra light. So when you've got a really bright flasher or a really bright bait, they're looking up at it. They've got the sun coming down on them. They're blinded by it, and it's just a flash. They don't know what's there. What you try to do is give them a little bit more of a silhouette to home in on, more than anything. I have 3 old Okies that got so beat to snot, I didn't know what to do with them. And when we started figuring that part of it out, the darker color patterns, we spray painted them black. And they'll get time in the water and they'll catch fish in certain days. So, spread dynamics. If I'm going out and I'm not sure what's around, what is going to work on these fish, I'm going to run meat in several different ways. So let's look at the picture on the right here. I'm going to be running a full rig off a downrigger. I'm going to be running a full rig off of a diver behind a flasher. But then I'm also going to throw what I call a naked off of one of the boards. Which is basically just a bait head on a leader, and it's set to run out there like a spoon. I'm putting a bait strip in it, and it's kind of doing its own thing out on like a copper or lead core. And some days that's money. That's what they want. If I'm not getting them on my riggers, but I know they're coming in on them, I'll drop it back another 5 feet, another 5 feet, another 5 feet until I can start triggering fish. I'll adjust level 2 feet, 2 feet, 2 feet, 2 feet up or down until I can trigger fish. Same goes with divers. If you're running slide divers or like what we do, I use OR16s and do the loop method on my divers. If I'm not getting them 15 feet behind the diver, I'm dropping it to 20. I'm dropping it to 25. I'm setting it at different lengths to figure out where it is they want that bait. There's something about the setup, they're not coming in close enough, or they want it real close, so you want to draw it in a little bit tighter. We've had kings come in 6 feet behind the ball. A lot of times our meat's going 26 to 35 behind the ball, and that doesn't matter on depth. A lot of these guys talk about the 100 rule, where, if I've got my bait is 75 feet down, my bait's got to be 25 feet back. I don't follow that at all. I'm going based off of my V that's happening behind the boat. I'm doing my spread dynamics. I'm finding my level that they're homing in on, and I'm going to soak that level if I'm targeting kings. And I want to do the V because I'm trying to agitate them with my flashers there. So even if they're not biting on those rigs, they might bite on a diver that's trailing 100 feet back. They might nail that copper that's 250, 300 feet back. They've already been agitated to feed by this. They've been turned on. They're going to turn away. Okay, here comes an easy meal. Here comes an easier meal. You know, that's your basic concept there. This is a lot of what we run here is on the left. So I'm going to run meat rigs off the riggers. I'm probably going to run a flasher fly and a meat rig there. And then I'm going either a naked or a spoon or a naked or a spoon. And that's our setup most mornings. Another thing to play around with too is, like I was saying, lead lengths. That's bigger than a lot of guys play on. They'll just say, oh, I'm running at 15 feet back, and that's what it always goes to. No, I've had flashers sometimes 50, 60, 70 feet behind the ball, and all of a sudden it starts producing. Few extra meat tips. Teaser position. This is one of the things I was going to tell you guys about. Why we do the teaser stops that we do, and some of you guys might not be able to see that, we put silicone tubing inside of metal crimps, and what that allows for is when it's wet, it slides a little bit easier on the line. So when you get back to what I was talking about, a butt crack, from that last teaser to the head, I can play with teaser position along that stretch. More aggressive fish might come in if I've got the teasers closer. More lethargic fish, I'm going to pull the teasers up. I might not even run teasers, but I'm going to typically have a longer butt crack if I'm going for more inactive fish, which you're going to see midday more often than not. They're still going to feed, but they're going to be relatively inactive. You've got to coax them into feeding, which is also why you troll slower in the midday. That's a big part of it. So I'll slide this one up a bit, and I try to keep these uniform to where, like, whatever length is behind the flasher to the first teaser is what I'm duplicating in the next teaser. If I go really long on the rig, that's another element of it, is the length of the rig. The ones I sell are all 60 inches, plus or minus an inch or two. That's a good general starting point. That's going to catch both active and inactive fish. You also still have plenty of room to play with teaser position a bit on that. There's times you might say, well, I've had this rig hasn't done much for me, I'm going to try cutting it down. So Brine Hall, a couple years ago, he was telling me his hottest meat rig was like a 45-inch bullfrog. He couldn't keep it in the water, and I couldn't get anything going on our boat unless it was like 72 or 80 inches. So yeah, that one was whipping. It had to have been. But varying lengths, longer rigs, it's the same as teaser position. Longer rigs for more lethargic, more later season fish. Shorter rigs for earlier season, more active fish, things like that. Another final tip on that is a lot of guys talk about meat rigs being more of a mid to late summer bite. That picture, I was on the boat rolling up all those kings. That was May 6th, and we couldn't buy a bite on a fly. We were getting them all on meat and then occasionally one on a spoon. Everything was meat. So it will work all seasons, and it will catch multiple species too. Maybe not so much on the full rigs. You'll still get your coho and steelhead on those, and you'll get the occasional lake trout. But we've caught browns, lake trout, steelhead, coho, and kings on meat. They're almost not. They're all feeding the same way basically. Length of leader I covered. Number of teasers on the longer rigs. I'll go with sometimes 3 teasers. Shorter rigs, I might go to just 1 teaser. I like it to be a little clearer than some guys. Some guys like to throw everything at them. For me, I like to keep it more natural looking. I like to keep it a little bit cleaner water. You see the same thing with general colors too. Some guys like brighter, louder colors. I'm more natural. So what I consider bright on my boat, you might not consider bright on your boat. You want that super bright haymaker, the yellow popping in the sunlight type of thing. Whereas yellow, for me, a bright yellow might be redemption. Bait trim for speed. The old way, the older style bait heads, before I did mine, you used to have to tune for the roll rate, and that can be a little bit of a headache. So I formed it into mine. The way you adjust for roll rate in my head would be, and one of the best ways to do it is start with bigger bait. Is if you don't feel like it's rolling fast enough, trim the bait down, because all it is weight. It's just you're pulling more weight through the water, and it's got to get that whip going. You're looking for more of a corkscrew as opposed to a helicopter. The corkscrew is going to give you more of a natural look. So just think of it just kind of doing that through the water. That's the best way to manage speed.
And you leave the hooks loose, right? You don't put those.
No, I put them in the band. You don't put them in the bait, no. But like on ours, we got that retention band.
Right.
So I'll actually take that leading hook, I'll run it through about that far, and I'll run it up underneath the band. It's easier when it's got a bunch of bait fish oil on it, but I'll run it up underneath that band. And what that does is when you figure you've got that strip in there, you now have a hook more midpoint on the bait as well as a trail. And there are times where they're feeding so aggressively, and you'll see this with spoons too. And we always thought, well, they're just smacking at the bait. They're not really feeding. When in fact, they're feeding really aggressive. If you've had it out there where you go and you hook fish on, you're hooking a lot of fish on spoons, but you're getting them halfway to the boat and they're coming off. You think, oh, they're not getting hooked all that well, or oh, I got to change up my hooks. They're feeding really aggressive. They're trying to take that bait head first. So when they come in on it, get that back in the band here. When they're coming in on it, and they're trying to take that bait head first, they're going like that. Where's that hook? It's outside of the mouth. So it's hooking them on the back side. So it's ripping them out. You're not getting that good mouth hook set on the fish. When we came up with this type of hook method, because we were testing a lot of different things with hooks, with the bait head, all of that. It took us 2.5 years to bring this to market. We were doing so much testing on it. We were fortunate enough to get a really hot steelhead bite offshore, right around the state line. This was like 5 years ago. I don't know if you remember that or not. Where it was like 3 weeks where if you didn't get at least 8 or 9 hookups on steelhead, you were doing something wrong. Like it was an insane bite. When we did that hook method, we were landing over 90% of the steelhead that were biting. And that's when we realized what was going on, because we were running it, years back, all we did was just the single treble on our baits. And sometimes you'd have issues where fish are coming off. And then while we were testing, we had one day, we're off of Oak Creek, we're on the Kings during Salmon-orama, and I got a naked on a 7-color. 8:15. We haven't had a hit on meat yet. We've got one king on a J plug and a couple on spoons. First rip on meat at 8:15. Runs out 300 plus feet of line, comes off. All right, well, that was the fish we were really looking for. Either way, we'll get it reset. 10 minutes later, same thing happens. Runs 300, 350 feet, spits the hook. It happened 4 times in an hour and 10 minutes. We're like, okay, we got to figure this out. That's when I bought the underwater cameras. That's when I started studying all the hooks, and that's when we came up with this method. And we realized, especially in that like 2 to 3 year stretch, a lot of these fish were feeding so aggressive, they're coming in on that head. They're not coming up and snipping at the back. They're trying to take it head first. You'll also see it too, these fish, one thing is, and this is more of a general tip than just a meat rig tip, is think of like how a walleye feeds. Or a bass in particular, a largemouth, is when it comes up on something, opens its mouth real wide and it creates that vacuum to suck the bait in. We're always moving anywhere from 1.5 miles to 3 miles an hour going one direction with tight lines. I've watched coho on film. They'll come up behind the camera. They'll miss 5, 10, sometimes 15 times. They'll keep trying to swipe at a bait. You'll see them like, and they can't get the fly in their mouth. So that happens more often than you would think too. General rig maintenance is big, and that's the same across the board, not just with meat rigs. Check your leaders. Always check for nicks. If there's a nick, even if we're running 50-pound fluoro, if there's a nick and you don't like it, pull it. You're only setting yourself up for failure when you do hook that big fish. Check your knots constantly. Check your line above your swivel constantly. Just always check it out. I'll typically I get lazy in the summer and it starts to frustrate me come this time of year when I got to start going through all my own gear. But I get in a bad habit. I pull this at the end of the day. I want to run this rig again tomorrow. Just wrap it up, you know, and I'm not taking a lot of care in the rig. Well, you do that all season. Next thing you know, your leader looks like this, you know, because you've wrapped it around the flasher however many times. Use pool noodles. I try to do pool noodles. I want to get more into wrapping them on the flasher, and then that way I can keep my setups together. There's guys that do that, and I've just been lazy. I haven't put it together yet. It gets frustrating when you have to retire your own rigs, you know, 8-10 times because you're doing stuff like that. If it's nicked from a fish, I won't run it. I'll retie it and I'll be fine retying it. But when it's from my own laziness, I frustrate myself. 8-inch versus 12-inch. It kind of depends on what the fish are going on your boat. You know, I know Caleb was talking about it to a few guys, especially after his seminar, where, you know, the guy was asking, well, what's that one versus that one? Find what works on your boat. You know, we run a mix of the 8-inch double fin, like, or single fin Pro Troll or Pro King style blanks for our 8-inch. Our big flashers, we're not running the big paddles. We're not running the big spin doctors. We've had our best luck with the Okie style, the big blade style. It's what works on our boat. Some days we've caught fish on these in May. You know, in general, you think bigger later in the season, and in general, that does hold true, but don't be afraid to run the bigger stuff in the spring. These fish are big. When you've got holdovers that can reach the low to mid 30s getting caught in May, they're out there already. You know, we've caught juvenile fish in August that were in the low 20s that you know aren't going to spawn that year. You know, they're big right now, so it's okay to run big gear. 8-inch, I've got guys, they run the big 12s off their divers and off their coppers. They must be sadistic. I can't do it. I don't like reeling in all that extra weight, and that's going to give you a little bit more drag. So I tend to run more of my 8s or even the smaller 10-inch fish style blades off of the longer lines or my divers. I tend to keep my big ones to the riggers. But again, experiment, play around, find what works for you. Let's see what else I got here. Just a few extra bonus tips for you guys. You know, my dad, he started in '71. My first memories growing up were at the back of his boat playing with little Hot Wheels cars. You know, I didn't really take an interest to fishing until I was pre-teens, but then once I did, it was game on. And things we've learned through the years, you start to learn a bit of a migration pattern, which I can cover with some of you guys, you know, once we're done with this actual part here, if you guys want to hear my thoughts on it. Kings have always been more of a hunt thing. Yeah, I think some guys like to think a little bit too strongly about the glory days, you know, where guys say, oh, you used to be able to point to a rigger because you knew that was going to get the next fish, you know. You had days like that, but it was always kind of a hunt. I mean, a lot of what we know now, we would clean house 30 years ago. But you gotta remember, guys didn't know that then. So they were struggling just like some guys do today. You know, you gotta find the patterns, you gotta find the fish. Never leave fish to find fish. So many guys make that mistake. If I'm on bait.
Following up on that, you got a couple strikes. When do you turn around and head back? You say never leave.
Basically, I'm finding a general zone. So, for example, it was like we worked Harrington last year for Salmon-orama. We were working about a 3-mile stretch, just back and forth, because we figure these fish are just kind of in the area. You know, they're not like your tightly schooled spring call. They're going to congregate together, but they're not going to be where I might get them here, but if I'm 100 yards this way, I'm not going to get them. They're going to be in the general area for the most part, and you also can intercept them if they're moving as well. But like we got spots off, we're seeing that when they're there, we're basically working a 1/4 mile to a 1/2 mile stretch. We're just figure eighting a spot and going back through it. The big thing with kings that I found is through the years it is more of a hunt. You know, you think of hunting a fish as opposed to just going out and catching fish. You know, I'm running my baits at this level and let's see if we can get a king. No, I'm paying attention to everything. I'm paying attention to what's the current direction? Been the wind the last few days? What are my water temps? Where am I finding these fish in the temps? And I'm trying to use that to intercept and think about other places they might be if, for whatever reason, I'm not marking anything where I'm at. You know, and that's all stuff that just comes together over time too. Most of the time, if I'm working in an area, I don't troll any further than about 3 miles, and that's pushing it. If I'm going more than 2 to 3 miles, I'm hunting. I'm not working a school anymore. But usually 1 to 2 miles. You know, I'm not going to just keep going. If my bite dies, I'm going to turn back on them. I'm also trusting my electronics. If I'm seeing bait, if I'm seeing hooks, even if I haven't caught anything there, they're obviously there, and I've got to change something up. You know, that's where then it comes down to isolating the location and then grinding it out. These 2 pictures, which you might have seen in a previous seminar, this was our Shakedown run one year, unforeseen, right there. We went out 1 in the afternoon, wasn't expecting much. We ended up with 2 kings that were like 14 and 17 pounds in a mixed bag catch. Now, my dad, he's been doing this a long time. He wanted to sleep in the next morning. My buddy was in from out of town. He wanted to try and get on him again the next morning. So we formulated a strategy. We said, well, we know we got kings at this spot. One of them came 68 down, the other one came 73 down, so we know the right level that they're at. What are we going to run where we're going to work that level? And they both hit generally on blue colors. We went out the next morning, and we ended up with 7 kings, biggest being about 23, and we did it. We were off the water by 8 o'clock in the morning. We had a limit. We went, and we actually went 11 for 13 or 14. And that 11th fish, I'm reeling in a coho that was all kind of wrapped in the line, and the diver starts screaming. He grabs that one. I get to this coho to the back of the boat. I'm like, let's hope this works. Shake the hook, and he just gone. But yeah, just be able to exploit it. Take what the lake is giving you for information, you know. And I did kind of say about pet peeves being relying on a network. It's okay to think about a network, but don't base everything off of it. So many guys go out there and they try and say, oh, well, so-and-so ran this bait at this level and they were getting fish. So I'm going to go out there, I'm going to run this bait at this level and I should catch fish. Well, what happens if you don't? You have to be able to adjust. You have to be able to take a look at what it's giving you and move from there. But with that being said, I'm not against networking at all. I'm not against any of that. I love having a network. Like I'll hit you up. You know, you guys had that good king bite. You know, I think it was 2 years ago. I think I reached out to you and I was like, what was going on here? What was happening? And that happens getting to know guys too. One of the best ways to network, in my opinion, and this really exploded us as fishermen between my dad and I. Because for years, we just kind of did our own thing. You know, we'd go out, it was him and I, we were hunting kings all the time. That was all we cared about, you know, and it was our own strategies and this and that. What really helped us grow exponentially as fishermen was joining clubs. And this is true for the guys that are watching live even, that might not be from the area. Still reach out to the clubs, get whatever info you can. Start to go on their pages, things like that, get to know them a little bit better. You know, and that's, you start building your group of guys that you know fish a lot. Where are you getting them? How are you getting them? You know, and you can start putting together a little bit of a picture as to what's happening as far as the fishing is concerned for any stretch of time. Some of the things that I personally would like to see as far as clubs are concerned is, and this would, you get a lot of people from Iowa and stuff like that, right? Make it more accessible to guys that are not from the area. You know, do your monthly meetings live. You know, get the younger guys in the club more active on the pages. You know, things like that. I think it's all good. I mean, we're there now. You know, like I look at it, I'm in my 40s now. I'm not a young kid anymore. But I still feel that way because I grew up fishing with my dad, who was one of the first guys out there, you know, and it's all those guys that I grew up following, and to me, they're always so much older than me, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I think you get what I'm saying. You realize at some point that, hey, it's up to us to do this. Yeah, join the clubs. You know, the lake needs it. You know, the groups need it, because the groups do a lot more than I think people give them credit for. And so many guys would rather just do their own thing, but at the same time, you're enjoying something we all enjoy. You're gonna make new friends, you know, forge new friendships. You know, it's all a good thing. For those of you guys watching live, obviously give Rob a call. I know you guys are gonna have a website up soon, correct? Yeah, it'll be a good source of tackle. He gets in what he can. With that being said, you guys got any questions?
How long do you let a meat strip run?
Usually about an hour at the longest. That's kind of my general rule. But if something's not going after 30 minutes and I know I'm on a bite, I'm pulling it. So something I don't like about that strip. Sometimes if I'm really lazy and I know there's not a lot around, I'm not going to burn the bait. You know, I might just say, well, it's time to pull this strip. I'll pull the meat rig and put something else down, you know, because I don't want to burn any more bait, because it might be I have to open up another pack of strips, and I might not be out for another couple of weeks. So now I've got this open pack of strips that has to be in my freezer, and like I said, I'm a stickler for my bait. Any added thing on it, I don't want. So, you know, I'll do some of that type of stuff, but yeah.
Is the care for these meat, is that pretty tedious? Like things that you take out on your boat for the day, can they be put back and
I'll put it back, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll put it back. A lot of times what I'll do is, you know, the tedious part of doing your own bait is the brining. And it's not even the brining. I get happy when it comes time to mix the salt with the water, with all that stuff, because I know I'm almost done. It's cleaning them. You know, like when I go out and do alewives, I'll do 200 alewives in a day. You know, that takes hours, and it's not pleasant. But you realize once you get them all together, like, yeah, I got bait. I'm good on bait. But that's the tedious part, and that's what a lot of guys don't like about it. As far as the care out on the boat, we got our bait cooler. It's about this big. Throw a freezer pack or two in there, a couple if it's really hot day. And then I'll say, well, I want 2 or 3 packs or however much I'm gonna bring that morning. And then anything, like if I do open a pack and I know I'm gonna be out within the next week, when I get home, that pack, then if there's still strips in it, I'll throw in a Ziploc, force the air out, and put it back in the freezer. So, but it's usually pretty good at that point. I'm a bit more anal about my bait than I think a lot of guys are, and that doesn't bother me at all doing that type of stuff. So you just don't want to leave it in the sun, you know, for extended periods. But.
So I noticed on your pictures of your bait, you had a tail. So are you using whole fish, just not the head, or are you actually?
I'm using whole fish, just not the head. With in general, you have what they call an A side and a B side. So you think of it as 2 fillets of a fish. Your A side's going to have the tail. And what I'll do is if I'm doing herring, I'll cut through and fillet it like I'm filleting a fish, and then I'll cut through the spine to keep the tail on the A side. And then I'll try to salvage the B side if it's a big enough herring. Similar with alewives, but there's a different element to it. What I'll do with an alewife, and Mark showed me this trick, is you slice through the belly if you're holding the fish flat, like this, head's here, tail's here. You slice through the belly, zip down the belly below the tail, and then you cut through the head. And what that actually does is now you've got, the way he did it is you cut down the underside of the spine. So your A side keeps the spine of the bait. With the herring, you're not keeping the spine at all. With an alewife, because it's thinner, more flimsy, you're keeping the spine at the side you're going to use most often, which is going to be the A side with the tail. And then it's just a matter of getting the scum off on the inside and trying to preserve the scales as much as you can before you put it to brine. So,
If you had a small alewife, can you use just the whole thing without filleting it?
provided it fits in the head, yeah. I had a bunch of red label herring, which are similar to smaller alewife. at one point, and I actually took, it's the poor way I say it, I took like a quarter of the fish off. So I cut down through the middle of the head and then chopped that chunk off because I needed it to fit in the bait head. But it was basically a whole bait. That was another thing I forgot to mention is with bait, we get a lot of questions. That's actually where we get most of our questions is on bait, but a lot of times guys will say, well, do you notice any difference between whole versus strips? And we found we do a lot better on strips than we ever did with whole. You know, back when we used to have heads where we could run whole baits, you would think this thing looks so real. Why aren't they smacking it? Well, when they're going on meat, they're not getting the oils off of it that you get off of the strip. You know, they've got all that added scent that's coming out of the meat, all the oil in the bait that's coming out of it. You know, so you almost have to start poking holes in your whole herring at that point, or your whole alewife. They'll work, you know, for sure. I know a lot of guys out west on the West Coast do a lot of that type of stuff, but for us, it's always been strips, just dominate over whole bait. So.
A couple questions on Facebook. Rich Blair wanted to know, have you ran spinning gulls with your rigs?
I've tried it. Not as much as I would have liked. I have a staffer out in the West Coast. He runs like spinning glows, smaller ones. He has a lot of success on our product off California. We've done it here, and we've taken bites running spinning glows like your standard lake trout size spinning glows as teasers. And I'll run it down on a wire just to see if I can get a fish to go. And we have taken bites that way. So.
Another question was, do you find the salt brine works better than the sugar brine?
I like the salt. I've never really tried a sugar brine. It's mainly I'm just trying to draw moisture out of the bait at that point.
Neil Bussy wanted to know, can you explain what a naked rig is?
A naked rig is, imagine, if I clip this here. It's actually really basic. It's a full rig without the teasers. You can actually do different lengths. So imagine this with no teasers, and then you're just clipping it into the end of your main line. You can obviously still run that behind a flasher, and there are times it'll work. It'll be lights out when a teaser rig won't. But you're mainly just clipping it into the end of your main line at that point. A lot of the times is the way I run them. So, but I'll run nakeds behind Dodgers. I'll run nakeds behind flashers. If I'm on a weird, funky pattern that I can't quite isolate what they're wanting to go on, I'll throw what I call a kitchen sink at them. I'll do the Dodger and a naked. I'll do a naked without a flasher and a tractor in front of it. I'll run a full rig behind an Okie. I'll run a naked rig, a long lead naked rig behind an Okie. I've got some rigs on our boat that go 8, 9, 10 feet long. You know, just trying to vary up the bite pattern a bit, trying to see what they want on a given day. So.
I'll ask you one myself. I noticed that the other guys across the lake from us tend to use a lot of spin doctors with their meat. On our side paddles, what have you found?
That's boat to boat. There's guys I know here that crush on spin doctors for whatever reason on our boat. We've never done much on them. But I mean, that could just be the color patterns that I have too, and the few times I've tried it. You know, it's a matter of finding what's working in your system. I got a buddy that fishes out of port all the time. He loves spin doctors. He crushes on spin doctors. And I'll go up there and I can't buy a fish on a spin doctor for whatever reason. It doesn't work for me. But that's individual. That's gonna vary boat to boat, you know. I got guys that, you know, when we developed our bullfrog rig, the prototypes, we crushed on them that year. I mean, we couldn't, it was like clockwork. And then I started selling them. Everyone else is crushing on that color. Now it's like number 3 on my list of choices on our boat because I got other ones that are working better for us. You know, it's just kind of how it plays out sometimes. So, but.
Not necessarily about me, but you mentioned dipsies or slide but you mentioned OR16.
Yeah.
So are you clipping on somehow where you can vary the?
What I'll typically do now, our wires are, I only got about a 10-foot stretch of braid, but what I'll do on the wires is, if you imagine you got your wire going down, I'll do an Albright to like an 85-pound test of braid, and I'll run like an 8 to 10 foot stretch of that, and then I'm doing a double uni to like probably 30-pound fluorocarbon. And then I'll run anywhere from a 20 to 30 foot stretch of fluorocarbon. So our wires are always about a 20 to 30 foot lead. But what you do with the OR16s is, if you imagine you got your deeper diver, your big mag dipsy, and you've got, basically you're taking the rings and you're putting the OR16 clips front and back. So I'll start with the lead one. I'll take my fingers like this. I'll do 4 wraps, anywhere 3 to 4 wraps of the braid. Put the clip on and then draw it tight, both sides. And then I'll take about this much of the braid. I'll grab another piece of it and then do the wrap. And then clip that in the back and draw it tight, and then that way the diver becomes your pivot point. So when that diver trips, the diver's taking all the force, and then what's nice about it is when that fish gets to the back of the boat, I don't have to hand line like some guys do with long lead divers. I'm just taking it off and then taking it off, and now we got the fish back there. So
So is there you pull that slack out then in between the
no, I leave the slack until I take the diver off. So. Any other questions, guys?
If the bait thaws, you have it in your cooler, but it starts to get pliable.
That's fine.
You'll refreeze it? What is it?
I'll refreeze it. Usually it's not too bad. I'm only bringing a couple of packs out. I'll have 30, 40, 50 packs of bait in my freezer when I go to start fishing for the season. And even the ones that are kind of thawed out, when you brine them properly, they're going to be pliable. Because you've basically taken the moisture out and in a sense cured your bait. So it's,
They're not solid.
yeah. So.
You said you have a website that has your recipes in there?
Yeah, that would be musselhead.com. MUSSEL.
Musselhead.com.
Yeah, HEAD.com. All one word. I did just stock up Rob today with rigs too. So, but yeah, we're hoping to have for the guys that aren't local. I'm hoping within the next several days I'm gonna at least start putting some product up on the website. We got inventory built up. It's just a matter, I've been dragging my feet wanting to get the last couple of colors together and then start planning the announcements of the new rigs. So
You'd mentioned going to the harbor and catching.
Yeah.
And this is probably more of a DNR question. Are you allowed to throw a net out to catch them?
that I'm not entirely sure on. I know guys have asked me that, but to be honest, I'd rather do the jigging anyways. It's fun, and it allows you to be smarter about the ones you're keeping too. You know, you're not damaging all this bait where all these are all small. I can sit there and say, I can catch one, hold it in my hand, you know. Oh, no, not big enough. Toss it back, you know.
What are you using to jig them up?
Sabiki rig. It's what you do is, you know, you to stay legal, they come 6 hooks on a run. They're about this long or whatever. You've seen them.
We saw it.
Oh yeah, and then you just I'll cut 3 of the little offshoots off, so I've got 3 hooks done. And then it's just put a weight at the bottom, drop it down, and you just pump when you're marking them on the graph. And then sometimes I get 2, 3 at a time. And last year it was interesting. We were jigging them up in the harbor, and there was like 2 pods of them moving around because you'd be dead doing this forever. Oh, got one, and then it's about this big. And oh, buddy's got one. You got one. He's got one. And they're all about that big. And then they go dead again. And, oh, got one. And then you're getting the jumbos. So there's like 2 different schools going around.
Is there special care after you catch them?
I just keep them in a bucket of water. I might throw some ice in there, but I'm planning on cleaning them as soon as I get home anyway. One of the nasty parts of doing that is when you buy flats of frozen herring, defrozen. You just thaw them a bit, and it's not too sloppy. Alewives, they become there's like a slime that builds on them when they're in a bucket and stressed and all this. So just getting a grip on them can be a headache. Get some like nitrile gloves if you're gonna do this. Don't do it in the kitchen. Especially if you're married, your wife's not gonna be too happy about that. I just do it on a table either in the garage or in the basement. Get it done. And then make sure you've got tubs. I've got like 6 by 12 tubs, about that deep. lid, you know, because I can do about what would be 2 flats or like 24 or 48 strips in one of those bins, put the brine in it, put it in the fridge, and I'll typically let it soak. You can be good after a couple of days, but I like to let mine soak longer. I'll put it all together, throw it in the fridge, the beer fridge, obviously the beer fridge, not the kitchen fridge. And then once or twice a day, I'll go up there and just kind of slosh it around, make sure it's all getting coated, you know, getting the salt stirred up a bit, and I'll go 5 to 7 days soaking them. So.
Last comment, OG Wonder Crawl, will that ever come back?
It is back.
Okay. Very excited about that.
I'll have to see who asked that because they probably know it's back. That was he knows. That was the running gag last year. I got harassed so bad on Facebook. Guys wanting that one color. And then finally I released it and yep. They're still harassing me about it. So, but yeah, I'm around. Any of you guys got questions anymore? If you guys want to look at what we found as far as migration and things like that through the season, you know, one of the biggest things is, you know, some guys will get flack because they travel a lot to get their fish. When in reality, I think guys that complain about that are the ones that are just jealous that they can't. At the end of the day, you know, other guys want to say, well, it's your network doing it for you, and this and that, where some of the better fishermen on my staff, they're on the road a lot, they're grinding it out, and what looks like a lot of kings, they're putting in time to get them. You know, they might go for 4 or 5 hours working a school that they know is there, not getting anything, only to get that 30-minute or 45-minute window, and they don't know when it's coming. They're putting the time in to get those fish, so, yeah.
How do you store your flashers? You got a box? Or?
I got boxes, yeah. Basically like those, I got a few of those Dreamweaver style boxes that, you know, they put spin doctors in. I'll use that for the 8-inch. They got bigger boxes for like the Okies and stuff. And then there's, I can't think of it. Place up north, they make them custom, those flasher tender boxes. But,
Mark Sandler wanted to know what blade is that you're holding?
oh, that's nothing. No, we're prototyping some patterns on some bigger fish style blades. Not sure if I'm going to do anything with them yet, but he likes it because that's basically a corn-fed pattern, but on a bigger blade.